So now that I realize the same skill sets that helped me get a job in corporate, same skill sets that helped me go into from college to corporate, same skill sets across the board that helped me get my first job, all of this stuff transitions into entrepreneurship. And so you just have to unlock your full potential. That's the reason why I'm super passionate about what I do. That's the reason why I'm 100% locked and loaded into this entrepreneurship journey. And that's why I know I don't have to ever turn back, because I know it's solid.
Yes, sir. We here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Welcome to Success is Us. This channel is all about success. Bringing on successful people, and we talk success. You know, she gonna bring knowledge, motivation, inspiration, everything that you need, all the tools for you to become successful. Today I got Arylle Young. How you doing today, Arylle?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Rick. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for coming on. She is a business coach, an entrepreneur coach. She helps people transition from uh, going to a 9 to 5 to an entrepreneur, an employee to an entrepreneur, basically. And so you can go ahead, introduce yourself more further.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Arylle Young, and I typically say I'm a career coach because I believe that in this whole grand scheme of things, we are essentially just navigating through our career and putting a strategy together so that we can get our $1 billion, $1 million, and create empires outside of that. But as I start to do my work, the word that comes up a lot is business therapist, because I talk a lot about mindset and that mindset shift to unlock everything that we know as corporate employees and going into create our own enterprise. A lot of the know-how is already in there. A lot of the action that you need to take to get your own clients is already in there. Sometimes you just need to unlock your own mindset and figure out what is it that you need to do to make your income sustainable when you quit your job.
Yeah. So, since you are a coach helping people make that transition, I'm guessing you went through that transition.
I did.
So yeah, where did you used to work at?
I used to work at, so the last company that I worked for was Delta Airlines, and I worked there for 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. And then I left actually 2 years in, but that's a whole nother story.
So what position did you have?
So I started in, let me give you a little bit of backstory.
Okay,
my first, what was that?
We like stories.
Yeah. So my first job out of college was a merchandise BA for Target headquarters. And what I was doing there was more so data analytics for supply chain, inventory management, and that would help inform like the buyer strategy. So the buyers would pick the items to go on the shelf, and then I would create the data plans and forecasts to say how many do we need to have on the shelf. Well, I was in e-commerce, so it was a virtual shelf, right? So because I was a merchandise BA, Delta was in a place where they were transitioning from speaking about like first class and coach as just like two different service offerings to being more so a merchandising perspective where you have 4 different SKUs on a shelf that you can choose from. So it went from first class to coach to business one, Delta one, business class, Delta one, first class, Delta Comfort Plus, and basic, all the way down to basic economy. So we had like 6 SKUs by the time I left. So the way that I used my experience to transition into my job at Delta was essentially, well, I have the merchandise experience. I need to learn a little bit about the airline industry, but I'm really excited and I'm really intrigued. And I was able to bring that expertise from the merchandise perspective. So every time my director was like, yeah, we're talking about, first class as a SKU. Arylle, what do you think? I'm like, that was my lane. So it's funny because every time you tell somebody you work for Delta, they're like, oh, were you a flight attendant? And I don't even get offended anymore. I'm like, no, I was in data analytics. And so I transitioned. I took that information from like supply chain. And now as so not now, but then as a data analyst for like consumer analytics. So understanding what's the customer pattern, how often do they travel, when do we need to put out a marketing ad for like this type of, for basic economy, which we never really did because Delta's avatar is the premier client. But that data, the transition of being a data analyst from like a supply chain perspective and then going in and being able to talk about like consumer behavior, that's how I ended up getting my into the company.
Okay. And what was your like overall goal? Like 5 years ago, what was your plan? Where did you see yourself 10 years, 20 years, which is just moving up the ranks?
You know what? That's what was fed to me. I was raised to be a corporate employee. I was raised to be a corporate leader. So my vision, if I could even call it a vision, like what I understood of success was that you get a job and then you play the corporate game so you can talk to the right people, get in the right roles, get another promotion, get a raise, and then get a new job. Like that was just what it was. But I never was happy with that. So when you ask me what my vision was, I'll tell you this. I probably wanted to quit my job the first day that I got it, that last job, because I knew I didn't want to go up the corporate ranks, but I didn't have another idea of what success was.
Yeah.
So crazy thing was that I just like, I took that mindset and I said, well, you know what? You want to use the skills that you have to get into a department that you want to get into. So my mindset of like my vision started to change from, well, maybe I can like parlay my experience in data analytics and then consumer analytics to something like people oriented. So human resources. So I was trying to figure out if I wanted to make a lateral move into another department or go up the ranks. So that's where I was at. That was my idea of success at the time.
Okay. Was it a hard transition? Going from employee, because you talk about mindset, was it that you already had the skills, but the mindset was the breaking point basically?
Yeah. So what I understand you're asking me is like, was it a hard transition to go from employee to entrepreneur?
Yeah.
And so that transition, I'll tell you like this. I was transitioning my mindset over a course of like 4 years, if I'm honest with you. And it happens, it transitions every day because as a corporate employee, you have one idea of what success looks like and you only know to apply for jobs. Right. And then once I didn't find a job that I was happy with, I just really like sucked at my job because I was doing work that I didn't care about, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. So the first mindset shift that I ever had to take was to treat my own job like a business. So once I took my job into my own hands, then I started to pitch ideas so I'll give you a little bit more context. Basic economy, and I don't want to give too much of like Delta strategy, but basic economy was a low ticket item. We talk about high ticket sales and we talk about low ticket items, right? Well, basic economy is Delta's low ticket item. And that was my baby. So I'm in a company where like if you're not necessarily nurturing the low ticket item, then you kind of fall into the weeds. So it created a little bit of depression for me because all these creative ideas I have, I wasn't able to do anything with it. So I felt like it was useless for me to be in the role. So that's when depression kind of sat in. And I actually had my director tell my boss, like, I don't think Aryelle's happy. So I was like, dang, it's showing, like people know on the inside. I'm like, I'm literally showing that I'm a terrible employee. And so the first mindset shift, like I said, was for me to take my job into my own hands. So I started reading this book called Presence.
Okay.
And Presence is one of the books that helps you understand how you can use your body language to tell your mind that you're happy, that you're confident, that you can show up proud. So at this point, I wasn't going into meetings. I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't coming and I wasn't showing up like 100% as Ari. So I read this book and I started to do certain things. Like when I came into a boardroom, I would push my chair up really high. I would say hello to the first person who walked into the room and I would create my presence around like my energy. Like at this time, I'm just an analyst. And so they're like, oh, who is this person? Right. So I started to get more stature. I started to get more like awareness just as a person. And I think that's the first mindset shift that anyone should make as an employee if you want to go into entrepreneurship. How are you showing up in your current job? Because if you're showing up like this now, when you go into entrepreneurship, you're going to show up as a sucky employee. You'll just be your only employee.
Yeah.
So was it a hard transition? It was a long transition. It was a long transition of awareness and then taking action, because that was just the first thing. And then years after that, I had to just kind of do a couple other things to just help me realize this is what it's going to do. So the last thing I'll tell you, so from the first mindset shift of owning your role as an employee to putting in my 2 weeks notice, I actually just drafted my 2 weeks notice like a month before I actually turned it in.
Was it fear or was it just?
It was fear. It was because you can't imagine quitting your job, like quitting your job. Like nobody wants to get fired. And I'm just going to jump ship for no reason. It was definitely, it was like, sometimes like when you're in a bad relationship, sometimes I say this, if you're in a bad relationship and you don't leave, God is going to decide that for you. And it's not usually going to be pretty. You might leave with half an arm if you don't break that relationship off before you need to. So for me, it was one of those situations where it's like, I don't want to wait until I get pushed out of the job. I don't want to wait until I get fired. But it's a little weird when you take that step without it being a bad situation. I had a really good boss at the time. I was learning, great visibility. So it was fear. It was like, okay, I don't know how I'm going to have this conversation. So I drafted out my 2 weeks notice. I'm like, okay, what am I going to say? And I just had it in my draft box for the longest. So it was just sitting there. And I kept having so many conversations with people. I'm like, I think I'm gonna pull that trigger. I think I'm gonna pull that trigger. So as soon as I pulled the trigger, this is the funny thing about it. I pulled the trigger, and as soon as I pulled the trigger, my boss calls me in the office and he's like, "You sure you want to do this?" Because everything in the universe started to like really test me. Like, okay, are you serious? I mean, that was just the first step is turning the 2 weeks notice in. Yeah. But when they start offering you more money, or when they start offering you like, okay, we'll make accommodations for you to stay, or just simply asking you questions to see if you could possibly change your mind, then the test is on. It's like game on, because God's gonna be like, are you serious about leaving? Because if you are, you're gonna have to put in some more effort.
Yeah. And so were you an entrepreneur before? Like, were you ever an entrepreneur before?
I was not.
Wow.
I was not. I had no experience. I'll tell you the closest thing to entrepreneurship that I did, and I'm glad I did this, I talk about it all the time, was I created a habit of working on myself more than I did on the job. So I was listening to just something with Jim Rohns, and he's like, work on yourself more than you do on a job. I'm like, okay. So I had a little whiteboard. I wrote it on my whiteboard. I'm like, how can I do that? The first thing that I did was I became a fitness instructor. So I would do, like, I was big on fitness. Like, you could tell I got guns. But at the time, I would work until like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. and not leave the office. It'd be dark and I'm sitting here going to my car, going home because I have nothing else to do in my life, right? But one of the things that I did was I became an instructor. And what that allowed me to do was I set my class at 6 o'clock. It was like either 6 or 6:30. And if I did not leave the office by like 5:30, I would be late to the class, and I couldn't have that. So I set the habit and the intention of pulling myself away from it, and then creating like a whole side business on bars. So it was bar instructor. Bar is like a fusion between Pilates and yoga and ballet. But so pulling myself away from the job, one, helped me start to really take action on investing in myself more than I do on the job. And then I had a second stream of income. So I'm managing a second stream of income. I'm learning that there's something more outside of work. And I'm like, then I start to think, what would I do if I did this all day? Like, what would my life look like if I wasn't doing this? Yeah. So it planted a seed. So no, I wasn't an entrepreneur. Having a side hustle was the first like idea that I had into like what entrepreneurship would look like. But I really just took a plunge.
Yeah. And you did say something key that I don't want to overlook a while back. You basically said that whoever you are, that's what your business is going to be. And a lot of people don't realize that if you're an impatient person, if you're undisciplined, if you're not willing to work hard, then that's going to reflect in your business. The same thing with trading. You know what I mean? Like I still go through this now, impatience. I just want to get it now, or like just bad habits going to show up and reflect in whatever you're doing. So,
to your point, here's another example. And I know you might resonate with this. So you have to tell me what your experience is like with trading, because I haven't gotten into that industry yet.
Okay.
But one of the things that we do as employee with an employee mindset is we're on the company's time. So we don't necessarily value time. Our mindset doesn't necessarily value time. So when I ask you what type of employee you are, think about what your relationship to time is. Do you come to work late? Do you show up late? Do you leave early? Do you leave things unattended? Like, how fast do you make deadlines? Do you miss deadlines? So for me, when I went into entrepreneurship, I had to already have like a wake up on time, get to work mentality. And now I'm working on my business. So I can only imagine, because there are certain windows when you're trading, right? So if you wake up late, you miss like a half a window to make money. Is that right?
Yeah, that's facts. For me, I trade. There's different sessions. I trade the foreign exchange market. So there's sessions. There's London, New York, and Asian session. I trade New York. So if I was to wake up at like 11 o'clock, I'll basically miss all the moves and all that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I gotta wake up at like 6. First, I like to like get prepared. I like to get my mind ready. You know what I mean? I don't like to just hop on the chart. So I had to have
Mm-hmm.
make time to meditate, work out, maybe read a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I really have to start my day way before I start my day. If that makes sense. You
Yeah,
know?
that's perfect. That's one of those things that I talk about as well. So creating a habit before you actually take that leap, preparing your mindset for work so that you can do that same thing when you quit. Like you literally just hit the nail on the head, meditating, doing yoga. Like, oof, my mom spent the night with me one time when I still have my job. And I
Yeah.
woke up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. She's like, "What are you doing up this early?" I'm like, I'm preparing my mindset for the day. Like it was a whole thing to just prepare myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Necessary.
before we get more into entrepreneurship, I want to, know a little bit more about yourself. So, where are you? Are you from Atlanta?
Well, I say I got my Georgia Peach license in 1996 because I've been here most of my life. I've been in Atlanta most of my life, but I was born in LA, right? I was born in
Okay.
Inglewood. I left 3 years. I left when I was 3. And then I went to Niagara Falls, New York. So I spent like 2 or 3 years in Niagara Falls, New York, doing snow angels, enjoying life in the wintertime. But then I moved to Atlanta, which was a bit of a culture shock, but that's where I got my peach.
Yeah. So how was Atlanta for you at first?
I was a kid, but let's see. The one there was a couple of things that I'll note that I noticed, which was shooting the bird.
What does that mean?
Shooting the bird. So we didn't call it shooting the bird when I was in Niagara Falls. I was like, what is shooting the bird? So that's off the topic. I'm not even gonna go that deep into it. But
Yeah.
another thing that I would say was a shift was probably my experience when I really think about it. Now that you asked me this question, I think my exposure to Black people, that's when my exposure to Black people started. My best friend when I was in Niagara Falls, she was a Indian girl, like no, she was a Native American. I'm sorry. She was
Yeah.
Native American. She was my best friend. She looked like Pocahontas, had the long braid, everything. And when I moved to Atlanta, I'm submerged into a Black atmosphere. So I think growing up in Atlanta compared to the places where I was kind of born/raised, Black excellence was never really a thing from in where I'm from.
Yeah.
And so if I hadn't been in Atlanta and ATLN, I don't know if I would look at Black people the same because you don't see a lot of Black success like in Niagara Falls for sure.
Yeah.
And then when you go to LA, I think I just think success looks different in the entertainment industry. Corporate looks different in LA. So you get variations in Atlanta. And so the biggest thing that I would say that I noticed when I was a little kid was simple stuff. Violence was a little bit different as well, but we know that didn't necessarily shape me because I was always in the house. My brother, on the other hand, that's another story as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But you know how girls take one route and boys take another route. I was always in the books. I did what I was supposed to do. And that kind of lends itself to my corporate trajectory, which is I just always focused on, I had blinders on like what I need to do. So I studied, my mother was a very lenient person. So, and I can remember vividly a day where I just didn't want to go to school. I
Yeah.
just really just didn't. And it wasn't typical for me. So I said, Ma, I don't want to go to school. And she's like, you don't want to go to school? Cool. And it's just a level of respect that I had with my mother, which is really weird because I probably was in like ninth grade. But I was so used to doing my homework, staying out of trouble, not focusing on the violence, even though we grew up in the hood. We
Yeah.
grew up in the hood at first, and then we moved away. We moved into a home, but I always just had blinders in terms of like what success is supposed to look like. To the point where in that moment, she's like, okay, cool. You don't want to go. You don't have to go. And I've always held myself accountable like in that way. It was easy. It's easy to like be great when you're in the line with people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, were there other people like in your environment who were like you, or were you kind of like a black sheep?
That's a good question.
Because like, where did you learn that from? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. So my mother would tell you I was always a serious child. My environment, the reason she would say that is because I feel like I was raising people since I was 6. You know what I mean? Like adults, you know, like you look at adults, and this might not be everyone's story, but as a young person, you look around and everybody's older than you and not particularly making great decisions.
Yeah.
So I think I raised myself in that regard. Like I raised my mentality. And that doesn't take anything away from my mother, because if I didn't have a roof over my head and food, I wouldn't have the sanity. I wouldn't have the peace to actually sit down and reflect. My friends growing up, I had neighborhood friends for a long time. But my mom was actually one person who's, it's funny because even though I grew up in Atlanta, my mom grew up like Beach Boys. She grew up on like Beach Boys type music, and she loves California vibes. So she's always giving me this like, you never know who you might want to be. You might want to be president of the United States one day. You might want to go and do these great things. So protect your image. She was always, and my mother's a politician. So if anything, in the environment, in my friendships, yes, like I could have taken a multitude of routes, but I always had my mother's guidance. And I think I just always had the mindset of wanting to do better. Like you just got to do better. Yeah. So yeah, I think I was different. I wasn't a black sheep per se, because I've always been like appreciated as a kid. I was a pretty good kid. And even when I'm going to tell you this, even when I got into fights as a kid, like they knew if Arylle got into a fight, it was probably for a reason. So I think I was different, but I held myself to a certain level that nobody else did.
Okay. And so were there any entrepreneurs around you growing up? Or there were?
No, well, I say I'm shaking my head yes, because that's a really good question. That's a really good question. I would say my grandfather was probably an entrepreneur.
Okay.
But to your point, I never saw him in business. So my grandfather had a hat shop. His business was called Hobbs the Hatter. His last name was Hobbs, and he was a black man in Niagara Falls who owned his own business. And his family lived upstairs on Main Street in Niagara Falls. So I would always say, like in my college applications, when I applied to the business school, I actually said these words like, my grandfather was an entrepreneur, so that's in my blood, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, that's the only influence that I had from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Okay, I lied. My dad owns a limousine company, but this is not anything different, because a lot of Black people will resonate with this. My dad wasn't like always there, so even though he owned a business, I never like sat with him and saw him run a business, see how he got clients. Like I haven't had really conversations with him about entrepreneurship until now, and I'm 30 years old. Yeah. So to your point, I would say no. I didn't really have entrepreneurs around me to like actively influence me, but I think it's always been in my blood.
Okay. And so were they like successful entrepreneurs, or were they getting by?
That's a good question. So I couldn't tell you about my grandfather. I would say it had to be a success, because he never worked a job and he took care of his family, and he died with stocks and bonds. And I would say my grandfather was probably a success. I would say my dad, on the other hand, he was probably more successful when I was younger than now. He has corporate clients, so you don't necessarily see the glitz and glamour of what he does or the revenue stream, but he talks all the time about how he used to do like Michael Jackson or Teddy Jackson, and Wesley Snipes was his client. Really? And he talks about that because he's in California. So I think there was a time when his business was booming. I just was a baby, so I don't even remember that. Now, when I see him, I think his business is steady. But he's also 70 years old. So my idea of success is like, I want to be on somebody's beach at 70. And I appreciate my daddy's hustle and flow, but I want to be a 2.0 version of what he does.
Yeah. And plus, just with this new age and social media, success is just like exploded. I don't even know how to explain it, but like the opportunities are limitless now, for real.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like for someone like my dad, his level of his idea of success looks a little bit different. Like he can only see it made one way, which is limiting because like this, he's 70 years old, so brick and mortar, right?
Yeah.
If you just change your mindset to accept the fact that you can make limitless money on the internet, then your potential of like generating revenue is like astoundingly way higher than what you would imagine if you just think like you have to go out there and hit the pavement and make money. So like you said, like I understand exactly what you mean by the limit of success is it never was there. I will say this, it never was there, but we're starting to see it more now.
Yeah, that's facts. So with your clients, what are some of the like similar difficulties that they have? Like what is the usual hurdle that everybody is trying to get over with?
The usual hurdle that everybody is getting on. So my first mindset went to time management, but we did talk about that. But I wanted to touch on it a little bit from a tactical perspective, because managing our time as corporate employees is always one thing, but then going into entrepreneurship and owning your time is another thing. So the first thing that I'll say that even was helpful for me was starting to reshape my mindset, my mindset and my relationship with my job. So owning your time is the process that I would describe this as. And what this means is you start to use your calendar and start blocking off time that actually means something to you. And like, so there's a functionality on the calendar where everybody doesn't have to see what you're blocking your calendar off as. It can say private.
Yeah.
And so if it's me time, you can block off me time. If it's going to my investor, which I don't say work anymore. You are either going to your investor or you are investing in someone else's dream. One way or the other. Let's just be clear, like that is the relationship. So changing your mindset from that work perspective to like whether it's your investor or you're investing in somebody else's dream, and then blocking off time will help you start to make that transition and own your schedule when you leave, because you'll already have your calendar saying, hey, this is what you need to be doing at 9 o'clock. This is what you need to be doing at 10 o'clock. You know what I mean? So on and so forth. So that happened for me. And I had a little bit of structure, but I could have definitely had more. So one thing that I identify with my clients is not having a clear idea of how I want to spend my time. So the sooner I can get you to understand how you're spending your time from the hour perspective, like I'm spending 10 hours on prospecting this week, or I'm spending 5 hours with client admin, meaning I'm starting to study on my client's background. I'm trying to figure out what activities and what assessments can I give them to help them start to think about stuff. But I didn't necessarily do that at first. So it was a learning perspective. So that's one of the things that I have to help my clients understand. The other thing that I have in common with my clients is the identity. So your identity as a corporate professional is wrapped up into the corporate identity. So like if you know, when you go to a networking event, you have, hi, my name is Arylle on your little tag, right? Well, not only do you have that, it's like Delta Airlines. Yeah. So I show up, I'm representing Delta Airlines. And even when I'm not representing Delta Airlines, I'm representing Delta Airlines in my mind, because that's where my value lies. So when you think about reshaping where your value lies, the thing that I do with my clients is like starting to talk through, what is it that you know outside of your company? What is it that you're bringing to the table? So starting to think through, what is it that you bring? What's your value? What did you even say in your interview if it wasn't that long ago? Because that starts to differentiate your personal brand and your professional brand. That's one. And then starting to think about like, who are you as an entrepreneur? What type of business do you want to start? And so what do you know in that industry? So taking inventory of what it is that you know to help you start to talk about that stuff on like social media platforms, so that you don't feel like there's this conflict of interest. Because like I said, we're so wrapped up into the company mindset, into the company identity, that we almost feel like, how do I go out there and say I'm selling something if I already have a job? Like I'll get fired. But it's you don't need to have that mindset. You need to start to so one, we talked about like this investor mindset, right? But then your job is also a client, right? So if you can have multiple clients, especially as an entrepreneur, you can have multiple clients. So if you have one client who's paying you $96,000 a year, then you can just get another client who pays you just as much or fractions of that, because you have more clients outside of that. And then leveraging your corporate identity to fuel your professional identity outside of the job. So I think I think it makes clients feel comfortable when they know you have that corporate expertise, when they know you've done big business, when they know you've dealt with millions of dollars, because now you can help their business grow to $1 million, right? It's just, I feel like it gives you credibility. So instead of you looking at it as a conflict of interest or a liability, or I can't start my business until I quit, you need to be leveraging that information and leveraging the company for what it is, whether it's your client or your investor, so that you can use it in your transition. So those are the two things that I'll say I identify with my clients.
Okay. Because so listening to you, I'm trying to make a connection between me and you. But the thing about me is I'm very young. So the only jobs that I've ever had, they weren't really like a career. You know what I mean? Like I worked fast food or a little landscaping job. So I never identified with that. I'm just here for the check. Like, I mean, I'm not staying no overtime. No, I'm cool. Like I'm not trying to do the most. But what I do relate is the time management. So I was a football player and I ran track. So like all of my whole day was already planned out for me. Kind of how it is for somebody working a 9 to 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I got practice at 6 a.m. Got a break, another practice at 12. You know what I mean? Coach meeting. You know.
Yeah.
So once I got out of high school and I'm not an athlete anymore, now I got all this free time. Now it's all me making my whole schedule. You know.
Right. So I'm listening to you, and I see the connection between me and you, because I was once in your shoes, having a full schedule as a student, right? Having a full schedule as a student, and then going into your first job, right? The first jobs that I had was I worked at Six Flags Over Georgia. If you didn't work at Six Flags Over Georgia, you can't call yourself a Georgia peach. So Six Flags Over Georgia, I worked at Publix, I worked at Zaxby's. I've had 2 and 3 jobs at a time. Like that was just my way of being an excellent like person, right? But what I'll say is, in terms of this mindset, the younger you start, the better. So I say I'm a career coach because that's where my roots lie. I started helping young people who were 18 to 24, start to get like use their skill sets and brand themselves, have the interview and network their way up into my company. So taking someone who's 22 years old and shaping their mindset so that they can have an interview with someone who's in a Fortune 500 company, and then leverage their resources so that they can actually go up the ranks. That's what we did for this point in time, right? But if you already have the resources to get a job, that mindset that we're talking about when it comes to like, oh no, this is just a check, right? Because we think, okay, McDonald's is not a corporation. So like, this is nothing that I need to put like forth effort into. I'm not working extra hours, right? Yeah. That's the mindset that really seeps into everything that we do. Because that employee who worked at McDonald's and was like, this is just a check, he also goes into corporate America and he's like, this is just a check, right? So the people who go from like 725 working the fries to management, those are the people who get laughed at, right? It's like, oh, he's treating this thing like a real job. He about to be, but it's because that person is operating like a business. Yeah. You see how the connection is made? Just because I tell a corporate employee, yes, you run $1 million account, but you still run it like, oh, this is just a job. It might be easier. It might be easier for a corporate person to change that mindset. I'm running $1 million account for the company to I'm running $1 million account for myself. But if I started at 18 years old and I treat my job, my image, my professional brand as that, then I'm going to be known as Rick, you know what I'm saying? The CEO. You know what I'm saying? Like people are going to be calling you CEO while you're making 725. It's a mindset. So if you already had that mindset at McDonald's could have been your last job, because you're sitting here like, oh, I know I'm going to be successful. I'm just learning the structure behind this business. I'm learning how to manage employees. I'm learning how to delegate and identify people's strengths. No, you don't need to be on fries. You need to be on the grill. Oh, no, you don't need to be on the grill. You need to be up here with our customers, because you understand that this is my operation. Yeah. This is Rick's operation. So because I'm in this atmosphere, McDonald's makes more money. And so, yeah, you can capitalize on me for now. But once I go into my own establishment, that's why there's so many young people out here who understand like business, because they already had that mindset, which I really do appreciate those who do that. So that's where the connection lies, right? And it starts at any point in our life, because even though like those hourly jobs might not seem like corporate jobs, they're all careers. You need to all think about all that, how each and every one of those things lead up to careers. This is the last thing I'm gonna say. When I was at Six Flags, I was a janitor.
Okay.
I was a janitor. Like, I was park services. And I used to have my pan and broom. I used to have the best attitude with my pan and broom, like the best attitude. I'm sitting here like, hi, what can I help you go somewhere? I'm sweeping trash. But I had coworkers. I had literally coworkers who would be, I'm sweeping trash anyway. Look like, don't even like iron their the collar on their shirt. Don't iron their pants. I iron my pants. I ironed the collar on my shirt. I always washed it the day before because it had trash juice on it, right? And I would always be sweeping because I knew there was more for me. So when it comes to like me connecting with you and anybody who's younger than you, that mindset of treating your job like your business, it goes to any age that you want to. And the sooner you adopt that mindset, the sooner you can go into entrepreneurship, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's facts. Because like I feel like it used to be information. It used to be information is the biggest thing. Information and mindset, right, is the biggest thing that hold people back. But now you can Google anything and the information is right there. So it's not information anymore. Everybody got the information. Now it's just the mindset shift. And that's totally difficult. You know what I mean? That's the hardest part.
But that's what a coach is for. That's what it's so I want you to change that. It's not hard, it's a challenge. It's not hard, it's a challenge. And a coach literally will help you like think through what those situations are. So the thing about it is our blessings are already right here in front of us, right? But if you think about how bad a mindset can like keep you guarded from what those blessings are right in front of you, sometimes it just takes a coach to ask you one question for you to be like, oh shoot, like it's this right here. Like I didn't even realize that. So that's what I appreciate about being a coach. I think I like to work with corporate employees or clients who are already go-getters. You already got that, $90K in the bank. You already have that savings account. You already have this successful career. You could go up in corporate. You already somebody's mentor. You have a great house, blah, blah, blah. But there's literally a mindset shift that you need to take to get you to your next blessing. And this is the direction you want to go in. Like if you want to go up the corporate ranks, fine. That's literally, I can help you with that, but that's not where my heart lies. But if you want to make that pivot, if you want to go to this level and you don't know what it's going to take, you can do it by yourself. But I promise you can save yourself a whole lot of headache and bumps and bruises if you get a coach to help you down that field. So it's not hard. It's a challenge. It's stuff that we haven't seen yet. I even have a coach because I never want to be jaded by everything that my environment tells me. Just because my environment tells me what's possible. Shoot, Jeff Bezos' possibilities are way higher than my possibilities. So I need somebody to help me realize what I don't even realize is possible. So it's not hard. It's a challenge, if anything, but we can see through that.
I like that. Wording is important though. Challenge. I'm gonna make sure I say that next time.
Yes, sir.
But, do you have any like stories with your clients that you'd like to share? Any like success stories?
You know what? So because I'm in this space where my clients come to me because they want to shift in their career. The typical career coach will help you with your resume, help you network, help you, with your interview skills. And that's where I started in my career. You know what? There are two stories I want to tell. So the first story I want to tell is like, this is actually it's quicker, but it's one of the first clients that I ever started working with because I wanted to help her with her interview strategy. Right. But in that interview strategy, we had to do so much mindset work that she started to realize like, hey, there are other passions out here that I could possibly be making money off of. And it opened up her mindset to entrepreneurship. This was before I started to specifically help people who want to go from employee to entrepreneur. And so because she started to realize, I got skill sets outside of this job, she ended up getting the job that she needed, right? She ended up communicating her value and getting the job that she wanted with like 15K more. But then she started to churn her mind on like what type of businesses she wanted to start. And for me, that's when I started to get the idea like, okay, okay, maybe this is what I need to be doing. So that was a quick story to tell you, like, I have evolved. My relationship with corporate America has evolved. I used to think all that was possible in terms of success was corporate leadership and corporate elevation and climbing the corporate ladder. And that's all I knew. But once my relationship started to change with corporate, then I started to see a little bit of a different shift. And then I started to allow my clients to see that shift, which was never intended. But that was the first story.
Okay.
The second story is actually what I didn't mention was, as a data analyst, I took on this passion project. And basically, so there's a shelter, there's a homeless shelter out here called the Covenant House. There's one in New York, DC, LA, New Mexico, and a couple, like 2 other cities that I might be missing. But in Atlanta, we had one called Covenant House. So we have little team building exercises as corporate teams. You know, you'll have like 10 people on your team and you're like, hey, we're going to go we're going to help feed the homeless. And then we're going to teach them life skills. Woo. So I'm thinking, oh, nice. We're going to teach these young kids how to cook, how to clean, blah, blah, blah. Well, I go there and I had a whole conversation with a young lady who was a manager at Starbucks. And she had all this experience with like managing people. And at this time, I'm almost making almost 6 figures, but I had never even been a manager. So the life skills that she had, the work experience that she had was literally kind of superseded mine when you think about it, because her business maturity was different. Now our life experiences were different. So that's what gave me the inkling that I can work with young people who are experiencing homelessness and help them with their career trajectory. So the story that I have is actually when I quit my job. One of the first things that I did was I worked at a shelter for young people experiencing homelessness, and I did that for a year. Well, there was a young person that I worked with. I sat down with him, and one of the first things that you have to do when you get admitted into the shelter is to get a job, like to start getting into like those job skills, get your resume together so you can go out and pass your resume out. You can get a job, right? So I'm sitting with a young person. It's like his 3rd or 4th day in the shelter, and he sits down with me as one-on-one. Like, you don't always get a chance to do one-on-one coaching with the young people, but he's like, Miss Ari, I'm gonna be honest with you. Just what you said. He was like, I'm gonna be honest with you. I never really had a career type job. I never had a job. I mean, I did this, and the other, but I never really had a job. So we spent like an hour together. Unfortunately, he spent a lot more time on a corner, like selling products with his dad and his uncle. And he had to walk me through that story of like the things that he used to do and how they used to set up little competitions on the block and stuff like that. But needless to say, he had to tell me all of that for me to understand what his skill sets were. And once he told me what his skill sets were, by the time he told me all of these different things like sales competitions, and he used to have different roles within the company where he was either creating the product or he was selling the product or whatever. And he wasn't so good at the first part. So he had to get to a different part of the business to see what his fit was. So as we started to talk through his experience and pull out his skill sets, we had a whole resume at the end that he could actually speak to and said, dang, Miss Ari, I didn't even realize I had like sales experience. I didn't even realize I had like, a competitive edge. I didn't know, like, I didn't think about products. I didn't think about any of that from this perspective, Miss Ari. And the fact that he was able to see that it doesn't matter how long you've been on this earth, your life is your expertise. And the way you tell your story is the way you get a job. But the way you tell your story now that I'm helping you go from employee to entrepreneur, the way you tell your story now is how you get clients, because your client is going to resonate with you. And if you can tell your story to your client, if you can bring a client on and actually help them get their transformation, then you can start to predict your income. And so that whole story is for me to just help you understand, like, I have my own journey from employee to entrepreneur. I've also touched people in different places where they didn't even think that they had the, and that's why I know I don't have to ever turn back, because I know it's solid.
We love to see it, man. Thank you very much, Arylle, for coming on. I love to see I'm watching your post, your branding. I'm really into branding. I don't know why, but I really love like just going through people's Instagrams and seeing how they put posts together and all that. I really love it. I wish you all the success in the world. You can go ahead, shout out your Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. First thing I'm gonna say is the fact that you like branding. We need to lean into those skill sets because as soon as you tell me something you're passionate about, I'm always like, okay, so what is this? Is this something we can monetize on? Like, is
Yeah,
this something
yeah,
that's actually a gift, or is this actually something that can be a strength of yours? So,
yeah.
so I just recognize that. If you want to have a conversation about that offline, we definitely can.
Okay,
But
okay.
if you guys are interested in learning about entrepreneurship or going from specifically employee to entrepreneur. And just because you're not in corporate doesn't mean that I can't necessarily help you. We'll just have to talk about the system that you're used to in your 9 to 5 and if I can help you make that transition. But you can reach out to me on Instagram, Arylle Young _ or on LinkedIn, which I think you should definitely get on because if you're not, you're missing out on a whole lot of opportunities. So I am Arylle Young on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook and Twitter. But
Mhm.
that's it. And I'm with Guided LLC. That's the name of my company, but I typically just represent myself.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so I'll have the links to her Instagram and stuff in the description as well as mine. Make sure y'all go follow both of us, you feel me? Like, comment, subscribe, and y'all have a good day.
Thanks so much. Peace out.